So just as a heads up, this is going to be a brief synopsis catch up, so there will be spoilers. So if you are someone who is worried about spoiling a character's arc or events of the campaign, please do click away now. But if you're here to get caught up, buckle in, because it's going to be a bumpy ride. So who the hell is Myria Greenmont? Myria Greenmont is the youngest daughter of House Greenmont and is played by yours truly, me. She starts off the game in Season 1 as a ward at Summerhall. Her family backed the wrong side in a rebellion. As punishment, Myria had to go and leave and stay at Summerhall, which is a palace kind of in the Stormlands. It's south of King's Landing. It's kind of in between the King's Landing and the Stormlands. It's kind of off there to the side. Don't worry, it won't exist in about 100 years' time. It gets burnt down. But anyway, so Summerhall is also the residence of Prince Maekar Targaryen. And Myria is the oldest of the wards, which means she gets saddled with babysitting duty. One of which children she has to babysit is Prince Aegon Targaryen, who is the absolute worst. Her initial experiences at Summerhall are not exactly pleasant. As the daughter of a traitor, she is looked down upon and not regarded entirely fairly within the court at Summerhall, though she is 13, so she's still a child and is not really given a whole lot to do except just learn, study, and be raised as a lady. Problems soon arise, however, when one day her uncle arrives at court with a prisoner in tow, her uncle being Lord Daemon Blackfyre of a Dornish house, House Blackmont. Myria is half Dornish. Her father, Lord Lucas, is a Reacher man, and her mother, Elise Blackmont, is from House Blackmont, which is another house in the Red Mountains, but on the Dornish side. It's south of Greenmont, in fact. So, Edmund shows up at Summerhall with a prisoner in tow who is revealed to be Daemon Storm, a Stormlander bastard who was found in the court of House Baratheon working for Sir Aegon Rivers, otherwise known as Bittersteel, otherwise known as the traitor that got done chased off of the Redgrass Field after losing in the Blackfyre Rebellion. So Daemon Storm is kept within the cells at Summerhall. One night, Harris Ball, who is also the son of Sir Quentin Ball and a traitor who died before the Battle of the Redgrass Field, comes to get Myria, and they sneak out to talk to Daemon. Daemon is uninterested in Harris and instead focuses in on Myria, trying to get her to be a spy in this court for Aegon Rivers. Myria turns her down and tells her that she should maybe think about who she's playing games with and that it'll probably get her killed one day. Little did she know how pathetic that advice would be. And they head back to their dorms, Harris being quite upset that Daemon had nothing really good to say about his father. However, the very next day, Daemon escapes from her cell, and panic ensues in the court at Summerhall, and the wards become suspects of releasing her. You know, children are traitors. She's a spy for a traitor. It makes sense, you know? However, the methods of questioning employed by Lord Daemon Blackfyre and his men were unorthodox, problematic, bad, torture. And Myria herself found this out as she was gathered by the guards and taken to a room with a single chair in the middle. She was placed and drugged and threatened with a snake as two men, Gerald Sand and another one who was Lord Will, a Lord Will, not the Lord, maybe the Lord Will, a Lord Will, and they were questioned. Meanwhile, in the background, Lord Daemon Blackfyre could barely look at Myria. He wasn't participating in the interrogation. After a point where a snake was brandished at her face, Edmund snapped and killed his men, taking Myria and fleeing from Summerhall. They had a very tough couple of days, facing starvation and hunger and thirst and having to run across the mountains, being chased by Summerhall guards, before they themselves were apprehended by a group known as the Vultures, who were staying at a place called Vulture's Roost, which is here on the map. Vulture's Roost is the remnants of a castle and is in disrepair, as are the men that stayed within it. They were led by a man named the Vulture King. After a couple of days in the company of the Vulture King, as prisoners of the Vulture King, Edmund challenged the Vulture King to single combat in a horrible, bloody clash in which Edmund ultimately won, becoming the next Vulture King, to Myria's horror in front of her eyes. At which point, with excellent timing, Sir Oliver Ironwood showed up to rescue his god's daughter. He, Myria, and Edmund had a long chat in which things were promised, deals were made, and Myria left with Oliver. They then headed to Castle Ironwood, which is Oliver's ancestral home that he has not been in since he was exiled. We'll get to that on his video, so I know you got questions. Arrival at Ironwood was surprisingly cordial. He was greeted with love by his father, embraced, and his mother was also warm-ish to him returning home. Myria was at Ironwood masquerading as Oliver's true-born daughter, Casella Sand. Crinkle, crinkle, fam. So, at Ironwood, Oliver convinced Myria to let him go seize Blackmont, arrest him, and have him stand trial for what he had done. As Myria's name was being dragged through the mud, she was now being accused of being a spy, of being a traitor, as well with Blackmont. So, Myria remained at Ironwood, whilst Oliver set out to Vulture's Roost to apprehend Blackmont. Whilst Oliver was gone, his younger brother, Sir Horatio, he's not a knight. Lord Horatio Ironwood arrived back from Sunspear, where he had just bagged himself a shiny brand new Martell wife, the young Lady Jane Martell. Myria kept up her ruse of being Casella Sand, calling him uncle, and getting closer to the Ironwood family, but it was made quickly very clear that Horatio had no love for Oliver, and that he had no intention of welcoming Oliver back, and he had no intention of actually running House Ironwood with any sort of competency. He was in it for himself, he was in it for the drink, he was in it for the money, he was in it for the power. And this began to rub Myria the wrong way. As you will quickly discover as you watch the show, Myria has ideas about how things should be and how people in power should act to those in their care. And she saw Horatio just kind of fly in the face of all of that. And it all came to a head when Sir Otto Ironwood, Oliver's father, died. He was an old man. He passed away in his sleep, which made Horatio the Lord of Ironwood, the Blood Royal, as they're called. Myria did not like this, as she believed that Oliver should instead be Lord Ironwood, because he is the oldest. It should be inheritance. That's how it works. That's how it go. And Oliver is her godfather, and he's a good man. And she, there's a whole thing going on here. So she stands up and she says, "You are not the Blood Royal. Lord, Sir Oliver Ironwood is the Blood Royal, and he will, when he comes back, put you in your place." Which, as you could probably understand, is not a great move in terms of PR for Myria within the house. However, the Order of the Blood Royal are an ancient knightly order within House Ironwood who saw that and went, "Hey, this kid's all right. She knows what's up. Like, there's a thing going on here." And shortly after that, the Prince of Dawn himself, Prince Myron Martell, arrived at Ironwood to pay a visit to his daughter and his new son-in-law. And just be the scummiest people, honestly. He brought, the world's tackiest gifts, and he was just a horrible garbage man. It all came to a head at one banquet where Horatio took a knee in front of Myron Martell, swore his undying fealty and all this, yada, 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 and announced the dissolution of the Order of the Blood Royal. Now that immediately set Kill Bill sirens going off in Myria's head, because she'd found evidence that Horatio had taken a big he'd taken a big payoff from Myron Martell, and that he had not put it into the house's coffers, that it was his own personal wealth. And she did something which was widely probably agreed upon as a bad move. So as Horatio is on one knee in front of Myrion Martell, you know, he's got his sword up, he's like, yeah, my lord. Myria stands up. She's at the table. She's at the head table because she's family, you know. She stands up. She grabs her goblet of wine. She moves around the table, throws it in the face of Horatio Ironwood, and she stands there with a huge smile because that's just, it's very satisfying. However, she was quickly seized by members of the Gargalan Guard who had arrived with Myrion Martell and the Martell Guards and the Ironwood Guards, and she was quickly thrown in the dungeons of Ironwood, where she had what critics would call a bad time. Because turns out dungeons kind of suck. Don't know if you knew this. Dungeons not a great place to be. Meanwhile, up above, in Ironwood, the Order of the Blood Royal are not going out without a fight. They raised arms, and Sir Francis Ironwood, who is Sir Oliver's cousin and had been kind of growing closer to Myria during the whole course of her stay, had raised his men against the prince and Horatio in defiance of this order that he must put down his arms and stop being a knight. At which point Myria is dragged from her cell, and she can hear sounds of battle all going. She hears Sir Francis screaming his orders, and she tries to call out for help. She gets a punch in the face because, you know, Goon's gonna punch cute, innocent things. Anyway, so she is taken onto a ship and thrown in the hold, in which she sees these suspicious long, thick spears that look too big to wield in sort of, you know, combat. And she doesn't quite know how to process what this weapon is, what she's seeing. But she just have enough in her head to be like, okay, they're probably going to kill me, so I'm going to try and kill them first. She breaks off a spear tip and hides it within her dress. She's quickly, shortly after that, taken above onto the deck, where the spear is quickly found because she rolled very badly to hide it. But she is brought up onto the deck where Myrion Martell is stood there. And she sees these weapons above all the ships. They're like crossbows, but huge and attached to the ships. And Myrion Martell does his villain monologue, being like, this is what happens to those that oppose me. Watch this. And he fires a volley of scorpion bolts from his ships that are in the harbor at Ironwood. And Myria is forced to watch as the place that she had been calling home for the past couple of weeks, if not months, is being bombarded. He's firing upon his own men to prove a point. And that tilts Myria. She's really not happy about it. And Myrion Martell kind of looks her over, and he, at this point, still thinks that she is the actual natural-born daughter of Oliver, Crinkle, because she is. And he says something to her about, like, he had been the one that arranged Horatio's attempt on Oliver's life at the tourney. He had been the one to order Oliver's exile. He had been the one because Oliver had killed his brother in a duel like a lifetime ago. And now Myrion Martell had Oliver's child in front of him, and he wanted to make sure that that line ends, right? He wanted no more Oliver Ironwoods in the world. So he takes Myria by the throat and chokes her as he holds her overboard before dropping her, intending for her to drown. Now, unlucky for Myria ain't gonna go down like that, and she washes up on a beach sometime later. She's not quite entirely sure quite how long later that is, but she washes up on a beach further down at Ironwood. And she is reunited with members of House Greenmont who had been en route to rescue her from Ironwood. One of which was Sir Rob, who she had kind of grown up around in Greenmont. They have an incredibly tough conversation where she's completely brought up to date with everything that has happened, because Myria has been very isolated from the rest of the family. She has no idea what has happened to her family. She has no idea about Alfred. She has no idea about Oliver being dead by this point. She doesn't have a clue. So she has what critics would call a very bad night as she is brought up to date. And she also learns that her cohort, Daemon Storm, who had kind of in a way stuck by her side since Vulture's Roost because she saw something in Myria. And she'd come with her to Ironwood. I forgot to mention that earlier. That's my bad. And had been training her how to use the daggers. She learns that Daemon had gone to attempt to kill Horatio in the chaos. And she had been captured. And that she was due to be executed. And Myria asks if there's a way that we could possibly save Daemon. Because Daemon, you know, she was one of the few people that Myria could trust. She cared about Daemon deeply. And eventually it comes to light that they couldn't, there was nothing they could do that would be able to keep Myria safe and themselves safe and to rescue Daemon. So it is 100% certain that Daemon is being executed, at which point Myria says that she has to see it. She has to be a witness to it because Daemon died because of Myria, or so she believes. And she has to be there as Daemon dies, to be with her in a way. Even if she can't be with her, she has to be there to see it. Meanwhile, just shortly before this, Myria finds out that Sir Robb, it's not even Sir Robb, it's a faceless man, and he takes her down to the beach, and he's like, hey, so actually Robb's been dead for a bit. I'm sorry, that sucks, you know, devoed. But also, you've got like a fighting spirit in you. You've got like something about change in you, and I respect that. And this faceless man's like, the House of Black and White's fucking garbage. They take contracts for anything. And I'm not about that life. So I'm going to give you, small child, who has been through hell and is incredibly deeply traumatized. I'm going to give you a freebie. Who do you want to die? And obviously, Myria is a bit like, I'm 13? I'm a child? I'm going to need a second to think about it. Also, what do you want because of this? And, you know, what do you want in payment? Because there's no such thing as a freebie in Westeros. Freebies, not real. It's not real. It's not a thing. So he replies that he will take something of incredible importance from her later on in her life. At this point, Myria is well and truly radicalized. You know, she's just been, like, the Prince of Dawn just tried to kill her for no other reason than who he thinks her father is. And to her mind, that is, like, an absolute abuse of power. That's freaking horrendous. That cannot be allowed. He fired on his own men to prove a point because of a personal grudge. So, Myria says, I name Prince Myron Martell. And the faceless man goes, done. Right. I will come and collect later. And she's like, later? What does later mean? What? Like, what? But then she's also trying to process that that's not actually, it's a whole thing. She has a whole moment. But the name was named. And she sort of tootles back, and then she goes and she watches Daemon's execution, and it's a horrible, hard scene for her as she sees Daemon. But Daemon goes out like an absolute boss. I just want to state for the record, Daemon is like chin high in defiance the whole time. She doesn't even give them final words. She just like stares them in the eyes. She's like, do it, fucking let's go. And she's beheaded. At which point, Myria heads back to Greenmont with Briar, who was one of the household guards that had come down to rescue Myria. Also finding out that Alfred was dead too. That's a whole thing in that too. Spoilers. So, back on the way to Greenmont, they come across members of the Order of the Blood Royal who had been routed in the attack from Myron Martell. And she manages to convince one of them to come back with her to Greenmont, who has remained there with her and has become one of her tutors in the Dornish sphere. So back at Greenmont, we have a 5-year time skip in which many things have occurred. And some of them haven't yet come up in game, so I won't mention them yet. But anyway, as we stand season 4, Myria is now 18 years old. She's a woman in her own right. She's a warrior. She is a leader. She is very angry, and she's hoping to get married. So we'll see what happens in season 4. Thank you for sticking with me during this long, rambly, wibbly, wobbly sort of journey into Myria's life. But I hope that's enough to kind of get you up to speed with where she is as a character, what she is about to do, or what she's feeling in the general vibe. And make sure to tune in to After the Fyre every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, which is 8 p.m. Central on twitch.tv/followblackcats.